Joining me now from Richmond, Virginia, Shelia Carapico, a professor of political science at the University of Richmond and the author of Civil Society in Yemen. And in Yemen's capital, Sana'a, for us is Hussain Albukhaiti, a Yemeni journalist. Thank you very much both for your time. Now, I should preface our discussion by saying that we did at TRT World speak to a number of people who would represent the Saudi position. They all refused to talk to us. Shelia, the Associated Press has conducted interviews in Yemen with militia members, with tribal mediators, with Yemeni security officials. Is there any reason to doubt this story?
I mean, it didn't come as a surprise to most of us who've been watching this war closely. Because, for instance, there were accounts of victories over Al-Qaeda, but there had never been accounts of actual fighting with Al-Qaeda. Clear that both Al-Qaeda and the Saudi-led coalition are fighting against the Houthis. The Houthis fight against Al-Qaeda. So, I mean, it's logical. What the Associated Press did was to give more empirical evidence for something that was quite sort of intuitively obvious.
Hussain, it appears quite clear that the United States and Saudi Arabia consider Iranian expansionism to be much more of a danger than the Houthi rebels themselves and the war in Yemen. Does that provide any sort of logic for making deals with such a terror group as Al-Qaeda?
No, it doesn't make any logic to make deals with criminal to fight someone who maybe you have an issue with, like with Iran. The Saudi-led coalition has used the excuse of Iran present in Yemen to fight and to attack Yemen. Meanwhile, we see that, as example, United Arab Emirates claims that Iran occupy 3 islands in the Persian Gulf, but still they haven't fired a single shot in there. What's happening in Yemen is actually that the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia are doing the same strategy that the United States has done in Afghanistan. When they recruited extremist militia, they invented actually, they are the one who made Al-Qaeda into Afghanistan to fight the Russian and then to fight other group who were against the United States in Afghanistan. And now the same tactic is done by the United Arab Emirates. They do it in 2 stages. In some areas like in the coast of Taiz, in Mocha, in Bab al-Mandab and in Al-Hudaydah, west coast, they are recruiting Al-Qaeda to fight in those areas side by side with the Saudi-backed coalition. But in other areas like in Abyan, in Mukalla, and in other cities, the United Arab Emirates just struck deals and paying Al-Qaeda money just to keep them quiet for a while, and they claim victory at that time. I remember some website in United Arab Emirates claim when they entered Mukalla that they have killed 800 Al-Qaeda fighter. I mean, this number of Al-Qaeda fighter to be killed in 2 or 3 hours has not happened in any area, I believe, on the planet. But to see that they recruited Al-Qaeda, struck deal with Al-Qaeda, and then they fight the Muslim Brotherhood, who are fighting side by side with the United Arab Emirates from the beginning. Then most of the prisoners in United Arab Emirates secret prison are from the Muslim Brotherhood, who have helped Saudi coalition to enter Aden. But Al-Qaeda is actually running free in South Yemen.
Shelia, Hussain seems to suggest the United States actually has a strategy in Yemen. Some people think that it doesn't.
The United States doesn't have a specific Yemen policy, but rather a policy which is to back Saudi Arabia in all of its ambitions in the region, which have tended to center on kind of being the hegemonic power in the Arabian Peninsula. Yemen is the most populous country in the Arabian Peninsula, and the Saudis have had, decades of attempting to control outcomes inside of Yemen. So the United States, by contrast, is just interested in keeping the Saudis happy and also in selling them weapons. That's a very lucrative business for the United States and also for Great Britain.
There is actually amazing testimony in this piece by the Associated Press. There are named sources who say that tens of thousands of dollars have been paid to Al-Qaeda for its members to leave particular areas that are then claimed, as we said in the introduction to this discussion, to then claim that the Americans, the Saudis, the UAE, that their forces have liberated these areas. The question becomes about what happens to al-Qaeda in the future. Is all of this strengthening al-Qaeda for it to then be able to continue its terror campaign down the line, years down the line? Shelia.
Well, I think it's quite obvious that they've had a great opportunity to operate, particularly in the south, but in other parts of the country as well. Al-Qaeda specifically, and then there are some other, Salafi-oriented jihadist groups, which again are engaged very directly, most conspicuously in Taiz, which is an important city in the center of the country, where there are street battles. And so, yes, they've been strengthened. And considering Iran to be the principal enemy rather than al-Qaeda, I think is it's hard to say whether it's naive or actually deliberate. Clearly, there are elements inside of Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, not necessarily saying the governments, but there certainly are elements in both countries that provide financial and other kinds of support for al-Qaeda.
Hussain, we've been talking about Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the United States. What is the Houthi strategy in this war that is now into its fourth year, been going on for more than 3 years?
The Houthi strategy at the beginning, it was to fight al-Qaeda. We remember that the Houthi has cleared Riyadh area from al-Qaeda member in a matter of 1 week. And even when they have entered the south, they have cleared most of those area, and the security in Houthi area, is much better than in areas that is in South Yemen, and we hardly see any activity of Al-Qaeda in those areas. And their strategy is actually to protect Yemen now, not only from the Saudi-led coalition, but to protect Yemen from Al-Qaeda, because they know that Al-Qaeda will be definitely brought by the Saudi-led coalition, especially by the Emirati, to any area they so-called liberated from the Houthi. And this is what actually happening in the south. And this United Arab Emirates tactic in the south to move Al-Qaeda from city to the rural area is strengthen Al-Qaeda, because it making them not a target for the Saudi-led coalition. And by giving them money, this means they can buy weapons and they can recruit more people. They can use that time for training camp, and as well Al-Qaeda control most of the main road around those cities. So many of the stuff, as example, that comes from outside, the goods, they go through this Al-Qaeda checkpoint, and Al-Qaeda force them to pay taxes. So in this war they getting really strong. And I think if nothing will not be done, if the United Arab Emirates will not stop this support of Al-Qaeda, we will have another something similar to what happened in Afghanistan and in Iraq.
Hussain Albukhaiti, Shelia Carapico, thank you both for joining us on the Newsmakers.